Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to Paul's Monday Market Update number 228 for Monday, 22nd of June 2026. I hope you're well. I hope you've had a good weekend and are enjoying this already eventful start to what is another eventful week in markets in 2026. If you're joining us live in the room, it'd be good to know that you can hear my voice and you can see the slides and the technology is working in our favor. That always helps. For those of you joining us for the first time, the Monday Market Update is just that. It is me flying through as much as I can share with you over the next 30 minutes, looking at strength and weakness within the FX indices and commodities markets, having a look at a few charts of interest you might want to add to your watch list, and then a look at the live markets. Okay, it is not a signal service. There are no trade recommendations. It is just me sharing with you what I'm looking at the moment, which might be of use or interest to you in your own analysis. And as always, you are very welcome here, but just remember you are always responsible for your own trading and investing decisions. And if you want a little bit more education this afternoon, I'll be running the Active Trades Monday Market Matters webinar, 2 o'clock London time. The educational piece this week will be on about attacking currency trends. Okay, how can you add to your trades to build a position? If you want to join us for that, you can do so on the joining on the Active Trades website or using that QR code to help take you there. And if you want a little bit more education as well, there is a special deal going on until the 30th of June, okay, for the next week for a special price for both VTP Stage 2, the swing trading course, and Stage 3, the intraday trading course, okay. You can see the details there. The QR code will take you to it, or eventually you can use the bit.ly code if you wish to do that, or ping me for some pointers. Okay, all right, let's dig into the main piece of the week, okay? So these are just some snippets out of my own STAM model. It's the work I do every weekend to identify where's the strength, the trend and momentum within FX indices and commodities market. And the reason I do it is because it helps me allocate my time, energy and resources for the week ahead. So what is this here and what is it actually telling us and how do we utilize it to help us? Well, here we are. It is week 26 of the year, okay, halfway through 2026 already, okay. In some ways that's a shocker, in otherwise it's no surprise because everything's flown by so fastly. But where's the strength, where's the weakness, okay, and how do we utilize it? So what we have at the top of the pile remains US dollar, still top of the pile. Interestingly, last week after the sort of supposed peace deal was signed, I thought we would get a sell-off in dollar, okay, as dollar had been the sort of war on risk off trade. But actually what we saw was dollar continue to strengthen. A lot of that was due to the, let's say, the kind of shift in markets interest from the Iran war across back to the sort of US economy, and in particular the impact of inflation, and also with that the kind of impact on likely trajectory of US interest rates allied with Mr. Varsh's first session as head of the Federal Reserve. That dollar strength remains, and we'll look at the live market in a bit to see that. Okay, we can also see even today, okay, over the last sort of 12, 14 hours, markets have been open. We can see for the most part, most of them have weakened against the US dollar. Remaining in second place there with it is also Aussie dollar, okay, so that's sitting there. But I mean, Aussie dollar, you can see, has been pretty strong all year really. So the only caveat I have with that is just to watch the price action, okay, and the bigger picture when it comes to Aussie dollar. What is interesting is that, of course, Aussie dollar is in second place, but if we look at its other Comdol chums, CAD and Kiwi, they are occupying the very bottom of the pile. Okay, and there's a real disconnect, real break there between the Comdols. They tend to move for the most part in kind of in unison, but there's a real breakdown there. Close to home, okay, what we have is stalling sterling, and that has, of course, been what's the right word really? That has kind of been, furthered, okay, by the events of the last week, and in particular this morning. Okay, of course, I'm sure most of you will have seen that Mr. Starmer has elected to resign as leader of the party, and invariably, what's going to happen is he's laying out the plan for him to leave, and they're going to, I think, have they're going to have a leadership contest by the 9th of July, so the winner of that can take over for about I think it's about the 17th, 18th of July, maybe a little bit later and stuff like that. But really within the next month. Okay, so I don't think this is a massive surprise to anybody who's watched UK economy, because and UK politics, because Starmer was a sort of a kind of a round peg in a square hole. He was never ever going to be a really good prime minister, and that got shown up again and again. I suppose the kind of interesting thing for those of us who may take an interest in democracy is that it's kind of curious that Mr. Burnham can be elected as an MP on a sort of Friday morning, and then on Monday he's kind of almost like sort of serenaded into London, like he's like a coronation for the Prime Minister in waiting. There's something that sort of sticks in my craw a little bit about that, but that's me and my kind of middle-aged old man rants there. But really, all we're interested in is how does that impact sterling, and can we benefit from it? With regards to sterling, well, actually, some of us, myself included, we're up late over the by-election because we were nursing our sterling shorts, okay, which traded nicely sort of through kind of Wednesday, Thursday into sort of early Friday morning. We saw a little bit of a sell-off first thing this morning, but actually a little bit of a bounce off that. I think personally, and this is just my personal opinion, is that kind of sterling and the FTSE, they will mince about a bit, but I think everybody's going to be waiting to see, is Burnham just sort of, given an easy coronation, or will there be anybody who fights him for a contest? And now, actually, I think what markets are more interested in is, well, who is going to be the Chancellor? That's actually what everyone. I can't believe for a moment that Rachel Reeves will be allowed to sort of stay in her role. All right, and then it becomes, if she's the best they had, who comes next? Okay, and so there's all manner of names in throwing themselves in the hat, whether it be Wes Streeting, whether it be Ed Miliband, my lord, no, or last night it was Yvette Cooper. I suppose my only point would be that if Yvette Cooper is the solution, then what exactly was the apologies there, ladies and gentlemen. It seemed like all my internet across the way just dropped out there. So clearly there's something going on there. I'm hoping that you can still see and hear me now. Okay, so that's fabulous. Okay, so clearly they don't like me talking about the UK government and stuff. There's you get an internet spike. But listen, as I said, I think sterling and FTSE will mince about a bit until we find out who the next chancellor is. That's my own particular view on that. And then with that, well, what we've had is, let's just draw this in. What we've had is basically Swiss franc has kind of rolled over a little bit there. Okay, it's weighing down there. Euro is strengthened a little bit, but nothing that you'd really get terribly excited about. I don't think. And so really we're in a little bit of, I would call it a little bit of a malaise. But what we're seeing is dollar strength remains. Okay, that's what everybody's going to be working with. And I don't see any real reason for that to change, especially with the events we have seen continuously over the weekend with the Iranians and the Americans and Trump's response. Okay, so I think that dollar strength remains as the main player. If I just look at the latest, okay, the latest STAM remarks, what's it doing? Is it confirming what we just looked at there? Just bear with me 1 second, okay? Everything is nobody's terribly happy at the moment. Here we go. So what we have is dollar remains top of the pile there. Okay, 4-hour charts. Look at the strength there, with Aussie in second place still. Okay, that 4-hour strength. Then we have kind of the sort of euro in third place. We've got sterling and yen, and that's kind of interesting. We'll look at that. Sterling and yen there. Okay, holding kind of fourth, fifth place, and then of course, as I said, Kiwi and CAD. Right, Kiwi and CAD there, okay, at the bottom of the pile. That's what's showing us up for us there. Okay, all right, let's start to switch across to the live markets. We're going to look at some charts of interest, and let's have a little look at the UK numbers, and then we'll look at the overall live market indexes. So just bear with me a moment. Let's hope we don't get any more internet spikes, and we'll switch across. So just bear with me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so here we are, charts of interest. Just always about sort of 4 to 6 charts of stocks or sectors or ETFs that might be of interest to you. You might want to add to your watch list. First one here is Microsoft. Okay, pretty much everybody knows Microsoft, only kind of enterprise software, cloud computing, AI infrastructure provider. That's kind of what people are interested in the moment, and it's included in all the major ETFs. All right, so I'm interested in this. Mostly, it has to be said on the looking at the sort of the chart, which we'll look at in a moment. All right, but as I said earlier, that AI infrastructure is what is kind of looked at the moment, and invariably we have seen how that has impacted share price for other companies, and certainly Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI, all right, is one of its main elements in terms of its enterprise software, its search, its cloud services as well. But also people are understanding it kind of they've got a kind of elevated capital expenditure, all right. So people are kind of interested to see does that AI related spending, does the kind of growth of their Azure product, all right, do that actually kind of keep people positive? Because actually the price action has not necessarily been that way. So this is a weekly chart. Let's bring up the drawing tool. And we last looked at Microsoft around about here, having had fantastic run, creating that really superb double top there that we saw on the weekly chart. And then as you can see, we kind of fell away to the 200 period moving average. And that was a really nice short there off that kind of double top reversal pattern. And what I'm interested in here is that, we hit 200. It looked like we were going lower, but we bounced off it up to the 50, and you can see the 50 capped it, and we're back down now to the 200. And so I'm looking at this, the kind of 50 starting to slope down, the 200 is sloping up, the 20 is looking to slope up. We're at the kind of $400 mark. But the last few weeks don't look exactly terribly positive for Microsoft, do they? So I'm kind of watching this to see, does it actually have what it takes to bounce off that 200 period moving average and move higher? Or do we start to kind of close and move beneath it lower? Last time we came beneath the 200 after a couple of weeks, we bounced higher. But is this indicative of something else? Okay, namely that we've had that double top, we're getting lower highs, and we continue to be in a downtrend for Microsoft. And as I said, that's why it's on my watch list to watch. Is this kind of squeeze builds? Does it like a pimple pop and dribble south? Okay, so that's why it's on my list at the moment. In opposite to Microsoft, here we've got Micron MU. All right, so they are one of the few companies that have got their earnings this week. Okay, so we've got we've got a few we'll look at in a moment. We've got Carnival, we've got FedEx. Okay, we've got Wise, but then we've got Wednesday after the close, we've got Micron Technology. All right, so listen, Micron is all about memory. It's all about semiconductors, all right, and semiconductors is the kind of the sort of the idea of the moment, all right. And as you can see, that has done amazingly well for Micron's share price, okay, over the last year, right? So because there's still demand for sort of the memory chips, okay, that are used in AI service, right, and that is, as you can see, has been a real growth driver for Micron. The pricing of memory itself, all right, okay, has improved significantly, and the company is benefiting from all of the kind of increased AI infrastructure spending, all right. So listen, this is about watching semiconductor stocks, okay, because they do remain sensitive to earning guidance. That's why Micron will be watched like a hawk, okay, on Wednesday evening to see whether it is continuing the story or whether there is cracks in the story, okay. But certainly, when you look at this here on the weekly chart, from having got above the moving averages, okay, back here, sort of 25 into 25, looking at that at just around about $80 to $90. Well, you can see for yourself, that has just been one fantastic trend, okay, and has continued to be so. Now, Those of you who have joined us before, okay, well, you'll hear me say that, once a price goes parabolic like this, okay, if you've been sat on the sidelines, my advice is always to stay sat on the sidelines, all right, because, once price goes parabolic and tries to defy gravity, it rarely can do for a long amount of time. So if you're already in this trade, okay, if you've already got it in your portfolio, well done, give yourself a pat on the back, and just, watch your stops on this, because as I said, once it pulls away from those moving averages and goes vertical, okay, it rarely lasts like that, okay, it rarely ends like that. So fantastic move, fantastic chart to look at, but yeah, just tread with caution if you're in that position at the moment. On the other end of the spectrum, okay, in terms of tech companies that perhaps are not going parabolic, as you can see, this is Wise, formerly TransferWise, all right, an international payments and money transfer platform, okay. So they are part of the FTSE, and in the interest of full disclosure, I have shares in this company. I also use this. These are who I use for my own kind of international payments. Okay, if I found them as a company to use, excellent, really brilliant, fantastic. And Wise, like most of those other companies, they've benefited from the structural shift, okay, away from sort of traditional bank-based international payments, all right. And so the customer growth and transaction volumes, that is what everyone will be watching at. And as I said, they are Thursday. Okay, they've got their earnings, and that's what people will be watching. And the ability to offer lower costs to clients, faster settlement times. That's what kind of differentiates the platform. But as you can see, the price action story has been rather mixed, hasn't it, over the last few years? Okay, so what we have seen is, I look at that as really, having been in a kind of a block between about 1100 pence, 1200 pence there, and 800 pence. Okay, so and as you can see, there's been some fair few swings in there, hasn't there? Right, certainly that kind of around about £8, 800 pence. Okay, seems to be a level of support. We had kind of worked away from here, and then what we saw was that a supposed talk by kind of, I think it was Belgian regulators, saying that there might be trouble at the company, which was enough for the share price, okay, to drop from that kind of £11 to £8 pretty rapidly, as you can see. I'm interested in this because actually I can see that, we're at around about £8. Okay, we have had, there's some wicks there where there is a kind of a big round number there. The weekly 200 period moving average is there. And so I'm curious because I'm looking to see, can this hold? Can this hold as a base for it to move back to higher levels? Or is this the base before it clatters lower? Okay, so that's why it's on my charts of interest list. That's why I'm watching to see how this plays out over the next few weeks. All right, another company that is reporting this week, okay, and interesting for different reasons. This is FedEx, okay. FedEx, listen, it's FedEx, it's logistics, it's freight, it's parcel delivery, it's in the sort of all the kind of industrial and transportation ETFs, okay, that's where it sits. The interesting thing for us is that FedEx is kind of often viewed as a bellwether, right, for global trade, e-commerce activity, overall business demand, all right. So when we see a chart going like this, like it has been on this weekly chart, well, then that kind of overall sort of gives you a kind of, the sort of warm fuzzies that things are all okay in spite of all of the other major news that we see going on. All right. So, the interesting thing, of course, is FedEx is that they have recently split out their freight element, their FDXF. Okay, that's their share price. I think they're reporting this week as well. Yeah, looking at that, they're reporting Thursday. FedEx reports Tuesday. But for me, having put in, I look at this here on this weekly chart. This to me was, there we go. Excuse my drawing, but as I say every week, I'm a better trader than I am an artist. But I look at that as an ascending triangle at the end of a downtrend, and then we kind of got above the averages here, at $200. And really, we have been, for the most part, in a great trend, even considering the kind of the events of this year, which has perhaps maybe made the share price move a little bit more volatile, but it continues to be that sort of strong upward trend. Okay, that's the way I look at it now. Last week is what I would look at and call a momentum reversal candle. Okay, in terms of what it printed. But as I said, I think people will be waiting to see what they have got to say on Tuesday evening. But certainly at the moment, that remains in a strong bullish uptrend, and I would treat it as such. And then finally, okay, for this week, before we look at the live markets, this is Carnival, okay? Carnival, the global cruise operator, okay? Um, travel and leisure sector, okay? So not surprisingly in that. I kind of have always taken an interest in these guys ever since I started doing these Monday updates. Started doing these Monday updates during lockdown all those years ago, and invariably Carnival got absolutely destroyed during those, and they have kind of ground their way back. Okay, and you can see for yourself there. Okay, from where were we a couple of years ago? Okay, from being down here at $15, we have worked our way up to sort of $34 there, but as you can see, it's not been one-way traffic as it has been real swings and moves there. And personally, what I look at as now is I kind of almost look at as that, we're at $30 here and we're sort of pivoting around $30. And I'd almost here, once again, excuse my drawing, I'd almost be looking at this as like kind of like that megaphone pattern. I haven't drawn that very well, have I, ladies and gentlemen? But as I say, I'm a better trader than an artist. But it's almost like a megaphone pattern there that I see there around pivoting around kind of $30. So these guys are reporting tomorrow before the close. I'll be curious to kind of to see, what's business been like for them certainly over these last 6 months. All right, with what's been going on in the Straits of Hormuz and oil prices generally, are people still booking cruises? Okay, are they? I will be intrigued to see. But looking at pure price, that's the way I see that. Okay, we are pivoting around 30, and perhaps there's a big kind of megaphone pattern building there at the moment. Okay, so there you go. There are some charts of interest. Because of the nature of the day we find ourselves in, what I'm going to just do here very quickly before we switch to the other live charts is I'm going to take a little bit of look at what's been going on in the UK today. So here we go. These charts are my intraday futures chart. So on here I've got, this is the 2-year yield, sterling gilt 2-year yield on the 4-hour and on the 30-minute. Okay, and just looking to see what the score is, what's been going on. So if I look at here, the 2-year yield started to rally up there from Thursday, Friday. Okay, that was sort of markets and their commentary on Andy, I don't feel a need to be in hock to the bond markets, Burnham. And that was the reflection of that. And interesting, what we have seen today is actually the 2-year yield had actually kind of fallen away. Now, whether that is just whether that is just basically people are in the inside and they know who's going to be chancellor. Maybe, who knows? Black edge is a thing, but people might have been expecting yields to rally, but they haven't on the 2-year. Okay, the 10-year as well, having moved here, the 10-year yield is the 30-minute chart, having worked nicely up there into the you can see from the by-election. Actually, today has kind of fallen away. It's dropped its way down there. Okay, and so as I said, I wonder whether there's inside edge on who's going to be the chancellor, or how it's going to play out, or whether it's just people who taking profit from that move over kind of Thursday, Friday, and now taking profit and waiting to see how it particularly plays out. But certainly that kind of is not how I would have thought many people would be expecting yields to play out this morning. It has kind of worked its way in a different sense. All right, so let's switch across to the indexes. Okay, overall. So I appreciate we're going to probably overrun a little bit today, but that's just because I've got so much to share with you. This is my indices profile. So what are we looking at here? You've got Dow on the weekly, Nasdaq on the weekly, S&P 500 on the weekly, Russell on the weekly, FTSE on the weekly, Nikkei on the weekly, DAX, and oil. So oil on the weekly, you can see it continues to drift its way down towards, in the sort of $75 area. Okay, looking to see whether it'll get a little bit lower towards that weekly 50 period moving average. All right. So, even with the shenanigans of the weekend, oil still continues to work its way lower. All right. So that is that's a kind of probably a reflection of the overall market sentiment. Interestingly, last week, if we look at here, okay, on the Dow, we printed a kind of a nice bearish pin bar. Remember, one swallow doesn't make a summer. That doesn't mean we've topped out or anything like that. But I was curious to see how that has worked its way out. Last week was kind of, it was a bullish on the Nasdaq, but I wouldn't exactly say it was giving anybody any excitement. What we saw in the SP 500 is a little bit of a doji. The Russell kind of, I would call that a momentum pin bar, actually, in the way that there's still most of the wickets to the downside. It's still pushing us to the bullish side. Okay, certainly what we saw with Nikkei as well, that continues. All right, that kind of continued sort of yen weakness against the dollar, that is reflected in that, the way we see that. Look at DAX, to me, hasn't really reflected differently from what I've been saying for the last few weeks, namely that every time it gets up to around about 25,000, it seems to struggle. See there, every time it gets up, it kind of falls away. Last couple of weeks, we've been above 25,000, but not with any particular strength or vigor, is there really? It's not, not exactly something to get terribly excited about. Look at that on that daily chart. There's a lot of wicks to the north side there, isn't there? So, as I said, once it gets above 25,000, it seems to struggle. It's almost like it's in rarefied air and it runs out of lift, okay, at this particular moment. That's the way I look at that. Close to home, if I look at FTSE, I still see FTSE personally in that kind of big coiling symmetrical triangle. Now, invariably, symmetrical triangle is a continuation pattern. Classical technical analysts would say, well, actually, Paul, we'd expect it to break higher and go much, much higher. And I think lots of people would love that if we did. The question is, what would be the catalyst? And that catalyst would really have to be the new the new government, and in particular the new kind of chancellor and perhaps the new business secretary. You may well have more confidence in the ability of the new government coming in than myself. Personally, I don't really have a great deal of confidence in them to be able to do anything remotely interesting. But we will wait and see. And as I said, I think price still continues to coil up there until we get some clarity on who's the Chancellor, who's the Business Secretary, what's Burnham's policies, because he's not really shown himself to have any real policies. Everything he's mentioned in his run up to the by-election got kicked into the long grass, and he withdrew or U-turned on it very, very quickly. So we're going to start to see him come under a great deal more scrutiny, and let's see if that basically makes him or breaks him. We shall wait and see, but I don't see any particular joy there for myself at the moment. If we look at a few commodities, gold, the weekly chart, we have continued to drift away low, and last week we closed again beneath the weekly 50, didn't we? We closed beneath that weekly 50. All right. Is that a case of the sort of that overall gold trend has flipped, or is this just a little bit of profit-taking break before we work our way higher? I think I need to watch that. There's nothing really telling me there on the daily, on the weekly chart. Even the daily chart kind of having broken through those layers, it bounced back up and has drifted its way lower. Okay, so my look is that I think maybe we work our way down, perhaps create a double bottom, and then we get to see what goes on with gold there. Looking at silver. Silver on the weekly chart there, what we can see is silver is also at that kind of weekly 50. Look how it's acted as kind of support there, right, for the last few weeks. Can that hold? All right, can that hold? Will that give it some? Certainly, it's beneath. I would say that's beneath the daily 200. We talked about it putting in that daily bullish key reversal. Worked its way up to $70 and then $70 in the 200 period moving average flipped, right? And we've seen our work our way lower. So it's in a little bit the same pattern as gold. Okay, we're waiting for a catalyst for that next particular move in whatever direction that offers us. And you might say the same about Bitcoin. Okay, Bitcoin on the against US dollar on the weekly chart. It is sat down here on the weekly 200 period moving average above 60,000. Okay, look at how it's just sat its way there. If we go down to the daily chart, okay, is that that it's It looks, maybe you might say it looks a little bit more bullish on the daily chart than on the weekly. You might be saying, well, okay, Paul, let's see if bump. Okay, is that a kind of a line of support that can hold, or is this just going to be a counter trend line break, or are we building a bear flag? All right, but at the moment, that is holding at the moment. Okay, so as I said, it looks a bit more bullish on the daily than it does on the weekly chart, but I wouldn't necessarily be getting terribly excited either way about it. But, as I said, we've looked at Bitcoin, looked at silver, looked at gold. Of course, they are all relative to the US dollar. So let's have a look at dollar, and we're overrunning a bit, so we might have a quick look at yen, and we'll finish on sterling, see what the scores and the doors are there. All right, so this is my dollar profile. So Aussie on the daily, euro on the daily, sterling on the daily, dollar Swiss, Kiwi dollar, dollar CAD, dollar yen, and then of course the dollar index. Okay, so when I'm looking at the FX markets, I want to see what the score is with the dollar index. Here we are on the monthly chart. Okay, we had been in this kind of range. We were around about 100 to the north side. Okay, and then 96 to the south side. But if I go down to the weekly charts, interestingly, we bounced up here, and it looked like we were going to sort of drift our way off the big 100 number, which we'd struggle with. But then, as I said, you can see how we played out last week. Okay, as the interest swung from the war to US interest rates. Okay, the battle against inflation in the US. And if we go down to the daily chart, I had looked at that kind of bearish engulfing candle here, okay, that we saw on the 11th of June, drifting lower. I think it said watch the 20. All right, watch the 20, PO20 there. And bang, we can see how we've worked away way up above 100. Okay, up there towards around about 100, 175. That is still I look at that as a bullish dollar trend. Okay, bullish dollar trend. Okay, that's the way I look at that. And I don't see anything to remove that at the particular moment, especially when we see things like bang, euro dollar here. Okay, we can see euro dollar on the daily. That has worked its way down. It broke that kind of 115 level, which had been significant support. We've worked our way down beneath it there. Okay, that to me on the daily chart is still kind of euro weakness, dollar strength. That's the way I particularly look at that. And that's pretty much reflected elsewhere. Okay, so Aussie weakness, dollar strength, Kiwi weakness, dollar strength, Canadian weakness, dollar strength, yen weakness, dollar strength, Swiss franc weakness, dollar strength, sterling weakness. Okay, so this is why I always want to know what the dollar's doing first, because it sets the tone. Okay, it's the granddaddy of the FX market. Okay, so let us have a look at what else. Yeah, yen. Okay, so having just talked about kind of yen has been slowly strengthening. All right, so it might not look it when you're particularly looking at against the yen, as we said there. In fact, it's getting up towards 162, which will undoubtedly have the Ministry of Finance, Bank of Japan starting to get a little bit nervous. But if we start to look at some of the others, well, not surprisingly, CAD against Japanese yen. Okay, that's where we've seen CAD weakness, yen strength there. Swiss franc, interestingly, Swiss franc, okay, against the Japanese yen. That is showing that Swiss franc weakness, yen strength. Kiwi against the yen, okay, we're seeing Kiwi weakness, yen strength. Even Aussie, okay, and Aussie second in the place of the STAM. We still, for the most part, kind of this month have been working our way lower. Euro against the yen this month has been a little bit of a block, as has sterling. But I would suggest that there is an element of yen strength there. Okay, creeping its way back into those markets. That's why I say watch the dailies. All right, and as always, let's finish with sterling as always. Okay, so cable on the daily, euro, sterling, pound Aussie, pound Canadian, pound yen, pound Swiss, pound New Zealand, and the FTSE. Okay, well, we've looked at FTSE, haven't we? Let's have a look at, let's start with cable. Okay, cable on the weekly chart. We've just worked our way lower there, haven't we, really, for the last 6 weeks. I wouldn't exactly say it's been beautiful, but we just work ourselves lower there. And if I go into the daily chart, it's not exactly been a fantastic trend, but that has been that reflection of dollar strength and sterling weakness. And interestingly, as I said, today, we can see we've actually had a little bit of a bump there. Okay, let's just go on to the intraday. So, we had all sorts of workings here. This is a 30-minute chart. Okay, we gapped down and kind of around work. Then we kind of rallied, okay, which is dollar weakness. Then we basically sterling weakness. And then interestingly, once Summer told the world he was off, well, basically sterling has rallied a little bit. Maybe that's just a little bit of a relief rally. Okay, you can make your own choices up about that. But generally, what we're seeing there is, for the most part, dollar strength, sterling weakness. Yen, as we said, has been mostly okay, even though it is strengthening against most. I'd kind of say that we are in a little bit of a kind of a coil there, working away pound against yen. Okay, nothing terribly exciting there at this moment. Okay, and it would not surprise me if we start to see maybe sterling started to weaken against Japanese yen. Certainly, we have seen sterling strengthen against the Swiss franc. Let's go to the weekly chart. I talked about here, at the start of the war, SNB said they were going to do manipulation to weaken Swiss franc. That has occurred. The last couple of weeks now, we are above that weekly 50, okay, which we've not been since, we haven't had a close above that since, March 25, all right? So, what's that, 15 months? So now we start to look at, and we looked at this last week, the 200 we bust, came up, nice bull flag, and we are continuing to work our way higher there, okay? 4-hour chart, we're continuing to work our way higher, and that is a lot more to do, I think, with the Swiss franc weakness. Okay, Swiss franc kind of has rolled its way over there. The condols are pretty mixed bunch. All right, okay. So sterling is weakened against Aussie, but it's strengthened against Canadian dollar, and it's all over the place against New Zealand dollar. All right, that's what we see. There's no real joined up thinking there. Certainly euro against sterling. We talked about this. I've talked about this for a while here, and that we look like in a big ascending, kind of descending triangle. Sorry, descending triangle, using kind of a 86.20, 86.30 as the support. We bounced off it and looked like maybe we're going to go up to this top where the 200 and the previous trend line was. But, we've had that kind of interesting, that kind of weakening today. That is just euro weakening, sterling strengthening. All right. So make your own decision about that, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Whether that is just, as I said, just the fact that people are having a bit of a moments of giddiness because Starmer is going, because they don't know exactly how bad it will be under Burnham, maybe. But either way, you can see that the way that has just drifted its way down there. Okay, this morning. Okay, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so we'll draw it to a close there. I hope you found that useful. I hope that's given you a little bit of help and insight. Sorry about the kind of little internet break before. That's it's that kind of day, isn't it? As always, I wish you the best of success with your own trading endeavors this week. Hope you have a fantastic week, and I will speak to you next Monday. Trade well, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Cheers.